I haven't said anything regarding the murder of Botham Jean and the Amber Guyger trial, and it's been for a number of reasons, but now that the verdict has come in, not the sentencing, which is the most important part, but now that the verdict at the very least has been handed down, it's time to go ahead and say some things. First of all, the Dallas PD pretty much already had an inkling of how this was going to go. That's why they fired her immediately. They were looking and going, gonna have a hard time putting the right spin on this one. But what's going on here is the continuation of what we have been fighting years and years for. As the Dallas News reports, there's been a seismic shift in how the police are viewed. And this is a seismic shift at the grassroots with the public itself. And I've been telling you about this and will continue to tell you. Yeah, every time that you let some scumbag like a Darren Wilson or a Daniel Pantaleo go, the public looks and goes, man, just as a matter of statistical error, shouldn't some of these cops go to prison? And you find a nope, none of them. That makes it worse and worse for the police because the public's looking and going, well, hell, somebody's got to go to prison at least just once. Now, Amber Guyger is, to all intents and purposes, basically a token being thrown. There was no way that white supremacy could save her, so they don't lose anything by throwing her away. It's kind of like with Jason Van Dyke. Someone that stupid, well, this idiot was too dumb to do his black blood ritual intelligently. And that's what's going on here. The murder of Botham Jean, this was a blood ritual. These white supremacist gangs, this is part of their initiation. You got to murder a black person just so we know that you got what it takes to do it. You can't be a fully fledged card-carrying member of the white supremacist street gang unless you got at least one black body to your credit. Now, before anyone goes getting too happy, I warned you that the police were going to start depending on the judges to overturn these verdicts. That as the police eventually, their public support would erode to the point where they every time you pull the trigger now, you might as well call the penitentiary and make reservations. Forget about tell it to the judge. You're going to have to be telling it to the warden. But that being the case, as the police realize that the juries are not going to let them go, even an all-white jury can't be depended on anymore. And the prosecutors are getting skittish and a little more timid about trying to do the old, let me help the defense to purge the jury of any and all black folks. It was a good sign for me when I saw that there were 5 black people on that jury. And the main reason why is, as I explained in my video that YouTube took down last year talking about black jury nullification, when you have a certain requisite number of black folks on the jury, that helps to make sure that if there's any clowns or coons or spineless jellyfish, that those guys, they get their minds right. Because there's more than one black person in the room. Because as Jason Black likes to say, you want to find out what a black person really believes, put them in front of a white person. Well, if you want to see if a black person has spine or not, put them in front of a white person. And if you got one black person in a room where they're surrounded by a bunch of white folks saying, let this murderer go, he only killed a nigger, then you got a lot of black folks who start to get wobbly in the knees. They go rubbery about that kind of thing. So you got to make sure that there's a number of black folks in there. That way, the intimidation factor is greatly reduced. And you also reduce the chances of having one Negro in there who tries to lend the good offices of credibility to an unjust acquittal. But the cops are realizing this. The police unions are realizing that the old games it's getting harder and harder for them. And what's also happening is, not all the dirty cops are going to prison, obviously, but the problem happens to be there are not cracks, but serious holes being busted in the blue wall. And as the police get on the stand and lie, the public's just going to be looking and going, what the hell good is police testimony anyway? You guys are a bunch of liars. Yeah, that old police immunity from law is beginning to die a very slow death. And the white media is terrified to report on it. They're just basically giving Amber Guyger was convicted. Let's move on to the next story. And in other news, that's what's going on. The cop who murdered Botham Jean was convicted in Dallas. And in other news, they're moving right along. Ain't no dwelling on this one. Nah, they're not doing any wall-to-wall. I mean, this is a seismic shift, as the Dallas Morning News reports. But you wouldn't know it by looking at the rest of the white media. Yeah, whenever white supremacy takes an L, they got to run away from it quickly as possible. And the police are not done. The next step is going to be that the cops are going to start demanding bench trials. I told you about this a few years back, and I want to make sure you remember it. They're going to start demanding bench trials as they realize that juries are going to be convicting them. It's going to be a matter of, well, let's just go to the judge. The judge will throw the case for me. The judge will let me go. And that's going to buy them even worse trouble. This has always been, the strategy has always been at some point to make sure that this jurist nullification, which is what you call it whenever a judge decides to do what they did in the Jason Van Dyke trial in Chicago, where the judge decides, I'm throwing out the case, I'm throwing out the verdict. That's jurist nullification. And that's what the enforcement arm of white supremacy is going to be going to next. Because a large part of why they wanted to go to juries was a matter of, for the same reason that white supremacy wants to keep black folks so hot and bothered about voting. It helps them to know how much public support they've got, how many people are backing them. Because the problem happens to be, if you can't get 12 folks, if you can't even get a majority white jury, let alone an all-white jury, if you can't get them to sanction and give a wink and a nod to the police execution of a black person, then what that means is you don't have public support. And it's only a matter of time before they start enacting laws to punish you. And then you're going to be fighting the entire society. So it's a matter of, I got to get you guys to keep going along with it. We have to keep getting you to approve and reapprove. We require your continual validation and revalidation. So that's the reason why juries are important in the eyes of the enforcement arm of white supremacy. It helps them to know how much public support, how much active public support they've got. Because after all, as the white supremacists were so fond of saying during the Obama years, well, when people go into the voting booth, that's what you find out what they really believe. Well, there may be a lot of angry Negroes in the street demanding this cop be convicted, but when the people are in the jury room by themselves and they're anonymous, that's when the truth will come out. That's when you find out who believes this stuff, and what they're finding out is, yeah, they believe that the cops should go to prison. They understand exactly what the psychology of the crowd is. And that's why jury trials matter to the enforcement arm of white supremacy. But now that that's been taken away from them, their next resort is going to be, well, let's just retreat to the judges. We're going to retreat to bench trials. But again, they're going to the bench trials because the judges were put there by the exact same scumbags who put the cops there in many cases. So this is supposed to be a matter of one part of the enforcement arm of white supremacy is going to try to protect the other one. But that's just going to buy them worse trouble, because this is pretty much their last ditch, running to the judges. Speaking of which, the judge in this case, that card-carrying scumbag, she's part of Team White Supremacy, loud and proud about it. Doing everything that she could to try to help get an acquittal in this case. And when everything else failed, her Hail Mary was to instruct the jury just before they go to deliberate, her last instruction to the jury. And don't forget about the Castle Doctrine. The Castle Doctrine is Texas' version of stand your ground. Basically what it means is you can kill anybody that you want as long as you're inside of your own home. You know, it's your castle, so you can kill anybody who's there with complete impunity. Well, never mind the fact that she wasn't in her home, but that was the judge saying, hey, if there are any folks here, get on code. Yeah, I know I'm black, but I'm depending on white supremacy for everything I've got. Now, I'm a card-carrying member of white supremacy. I'm on the team, so I got to do white supremacy's bidding. Don't forget the Castle Doctrine. That's a hell of a thing to say right before the jury goes to deliberate. And the jury, you can tell they were confused by that, because they were like, we need instruction on this castle doctrine. Yeah, because nobody had brought that up before, because it was irrelevant. It has no bearing on this trial. There was no reason in hell for her to say that. She was telegraphing and broadcasting to white supremacy. Yeah, the judge is on the take. So come Monday, you watch that judge. This judge is going to be doing everything that she can to try to minimize the sentence. Amber Guyger should spend the rest of her days in a cage like the animal she is. But I think the judge is already making it clear, I'm willing to fall on my sword for white supremacy. I warned you about this. They're going to be running to those judges next, because the judges are pretty much going to be their last line of defense. So we got to make sure that we light them up, and we got to make sure that we point them out. Judges who are going to be trying to reduce the sentences to nearly nothing or throwing the verdicts out altogether. So don't just be looking to see whether or not these killer cops get convicted. You look to see what the sentence is. How many years are they going to be spending behind bars? They're supposed to get the hardest time there is. That's what the goal is. The goal ain't some penny any conviction. That's what happened to Peter Liang. He got convicted. And then that scumbag DA decided, Judge, Your Honor, put the verdict aside. And the judge, instead of the judge looking and going, I'll be the judge of that, instead the judge said, okay, sure, absolutely. They would never do that in any other circumstance. And in the case of Jason Van Dyke, you had a somewhat less watered down version of the same event. The judge looked and said, I think you're being too harsh on this guy. Just because he killed an unarmed black person and shot him to death, just unloaded on the guy for no damn reason. I don't think that he should go to prison. But even then, the cops could even trace the trend line of how their influence was diminishing. They had gone from just being able to walk out of court to you got convicted, but the DA helped you get your neck out of the noose. 2, you got convicted, but the judge said, well, you got to do some time in prison. And now you're just going to jail, period. This has to be the norm. Any prosecutor who refuses to bring charges or who tries to bury the case during the grand jury or by throwing the case altogether at trial, they've committed prosecutorial misconduct and they should be punished. Any judge who illegally overrides a proper conviction for the sake of letting murderers walk should be punished. Any so-called investigator who gets on the stand and deliberately perjures himself like that bastard from the Texas Rangers did, that scumbag like that should be punished. And no, it didn't miss my notice that the Texas Rangers got some Negro to try to derail the case. Probably the only time that they put an allegedly black man in charge of a police murder case. Because, of course, this clown wasn't in charge of anything at all. He was there to stop the case. He was there to try to short-circuit any chance of a conviction. But he failed. The public should be on his worthless behind until he's mopping floors at the local Salvation Army. Take his badge, take his career and his freedom. Make an example of what happens to dirty cops who try to cover for killer cops. But our next move must be to push for the most severe penalties for police who murder black people. Obama passed that shrieking fraud of Blue Lives Matter. Well, we need a Black Lives Matter law. If a cop kills someone who they know to be black, that must carry an automatic life sentence without parole. You want extraordinary authority under law, then you will also accept extraordinary punishment as well. Yeah, the police's position has become more and more increasingly desperate, and they've noticed it. You went from Betty Shelby, the glass-eyed, just psychopath, this woman should have been a shoo-in to be convicted because everything about her just reeks of sociopath. This woman has no emotion whatsoever. Everybody should have been looking and going, we might want to lock her up for our own good, but you got that Oklahoma group of goofballs, that bunch of hillbillies who looked and said, well, she ain't killed nothing but a nigger, and I'm pretty sure she ain't coming after us next. So as far as they're concerned, they'll play Russian roulette with their lives and yours. But Amber Guyger, I guess she figured, because there had already been some Texas cops who had been convicted earlier this year and late last year. So I guess her defense team looked and said, you better pour it on. You better remind them that you're a white woman, that you're a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman. Get on the stand, cry, say, just say that, it was so tragic what happened to me. And that's what she was saying. It was so tragic what happened to me. She was putting on the crocodile tears. She was doing the whole white woman routine. I'm a white woman. You can't send me to prison. This black man, I told him not to come at me, and he came at me, and I was scared for my life. Now, you know that when a white woman, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman, can't get away with murdering a black man, when that happens, that's how you know white supremacy's got a few holes that have been blasted in the blue wall. That's how you know. When a white woman winds up getting convicted for killing a black man, a white female cop gets convicted, that's when white supremacy is looking and going, we got a problem here. And don't go looking for the white media to make any hay out of this, because they're in damage control mode right now. They're looking at what's happened to the enforcement arm of white supremacy, and they're looking and going, well, who's going to use violence in order to secure our position? The only reason we got to put up with all of these white media outlets is because of the fact that it is illegal for you to have your own. Instead of you being able to just start your own, you know that you got to get white supremacy's permission. And what happens if I don't get their permission? Well, they send Amber Guyger and they send Daniel Pantaleo to tell you that we're going to deal with you. Violence is how white supremacy got the world and how it intends to keep it. So don't expect the white media to call this out. These are, as far as they're concerned, the enforcement arm of white supremacy are the guardians of white privilege and white prerogative. So that's why the false news crowd have been silent. They've been all of a sudden they've lost all of their interest in any of these police shooting cases. They've gone from being utterly obsessed to being completely disinterested. You had false news saying that Amber Guyger was a Dallas police officer when she had been fired a year ago. She hasn't been a cop in God knows how long, but Fox News was still referring to her as a police officer. Not a former police officer, not an ex-police officer. Now, part of that is because, well, this is Fox News and research, basic investigation. That's not what they're there for. They're there to basically say whatever right-wing white males in particular, whatever diddles their egos. So nobody expects Fox News to say anything intelligent, but they weren't alone. The rest of the white media trying to figure out how to say that, well, this white cop, she was well within her rights. That's what they wanted to say. They wanted to try to figure out, can we dirty up the deceased? Can we dump some dirt on him? Can we say that he was a bad guy? Can we send the message, he deserved to die? He was a bad guy. Well, you know, if the cops make a mistake, well, we got to take the cops' word for it because after all, we only have her side of the story and we can't disbelieve the police. Why, there would be niggers running free in the streets if we disbelieve the police. Yeah, the white media understands that they're losing credibility. And they're losing credibility in the worst way because they need the enforcement arm of white supremacy to secure and enforce and protect their position. That's why the white media is never going to tell the truth about the police, because they desperately need the police. But you're not hearing anybody anymore doing the old, all the facts haven't come out ploy. They ain't doing that. Yeah, it's been a while since we've heard that lie, isn't it? Yeah, as more cops get convicted, the would-be white supremacist mouthpieces understand that their old talking points and their old ploys just don't work anymore. That stuff don't play. As I said, using those lying talking points, they would work until they stop working. White supremacy knows that when they've lost an argument, it's best for them to run away and refuse to talk about it anymore. That's the best thing that they can do, because the more they talk about it, the more that they reinforce how wrong they are. They can't afford to engage on this one. They can't afford to conduct any sort of in-depth examination of it. And by the way, it ain't just Fox News refusing to talk about it. Why is it that MSNBC isn't talking about it? Rachel Maddow ain't saying anything. Joy Jackass Reid ain't saying anything. Ari Melber ain't saying anything. Yeah, your friends over at MSNBC, they ain't talking about this and saying, man, how things have changed. They're not trying to reinforce that the police have lost their credibility. They're not trying to reinforce that narrative. The narrative is that the police walk on water. They are authorities because they are the guardians of white supremacy. So we must reinforce that. You don't question the guardians of white supremacy. Because if we start talking about this, then we're going to have to start looking at the police and going, gee, a lot of cops getting convicted. Say, are you guys revising your hiring practices? What about having a more robust internal affairs department? Better yet, let's move the internal affairs department functions outside of the police, because it's pretty obvious you guys can't be trusted. Nah, no tough questions for the enforcement arm of white supremacy. And this is MSNBC and CNN giving the white glove treatment to white supremacy, to the police. Not questioning the police. Aren't these liberal networks always talking about, we speak truth to power? Yeah, but you never speak truth to the enforcement arm of white supremacy. We speak truth to power. Yeah, except when it's white power, then you ain't speaking to anything. So a lot of the police's well-wishers and fellow travelers and support apparatuses are getting exposed. A lot of folks are getting exposed. When the police get away with murdering a black person, the white media is the first ones to justify it and defend it. But when the police get punished, they pretend like they didn't know that it happened. Jeffrey Toobin was so proud, just beaming with pride when he was on CNN saying, well, it's just a reality that it's hard to convict police because the public trusts them. Yeah, well, where's Jeffrey Toobin at now? Where's he at now to explain how the public doesn't trust the police? And in Texas, of all places. Now, if the police have lost their immunity from law in Texas, that means that they can go down anywhere. The white media is neither left nor right wing. They are not liberal or conservative when it comes to black people. It's just the white media. Their job is to push and promote lies that serve the interests of white supremacy, and carrying out executions of black people with impunity. That is the primary interest of white power. The primary preoccupation of white power is making sure that black people, black men in specific, are kept under control, and that control is carried out through relentless, unchecked, public, out in the open violence. Otherwise, white supremacy cannot be sustained any other way. White supremacy would be vigorously challenged. And there would be no means to just say, well, you know what? It just is. Well, why should we allow this white supremacist institution or this white supremacist practice to stand? Well, just do. Nah, not unless you got some violence behind it. Slowly but surely, we are disarming the enforcement arm of white supremacy. But don't go calling it a victory, folks. The true point is not to get a conviction. It's to put this animal in a cage where she belongs. White supremacy has set up the judicial system as a revolving door meant to give them all types of chances to get away with crimes. Now, we can break down their little con game, but we have to be consistent. Recognize the tricks that white supremacy tries to use. You keep your eye on the ball. Justice has not been served until you say justice has been served. Don't let the white media trick you into thinking that getting a conviction is all you need to do. No. You are not going to be protected by the police getting convicted. You will only be protected when the police are in prison for a damn long time, when they are sentenced to decades in prison. That's when you're going to find that all these race soldiers start getting real timid. All of a sudden, they're going to be looking and going, I better not pull this gun, because if I do, I might as well, I've just signed my own arrest warrant. And worse than that, if you pull that gun or decide worse that you'll pull the trigger, you might as well call the warden at the penitentiary and tell him, I'd like solitary confinement if you don't mind. Whatever clean bunk you got ready, because I'll be checking in real soon. Yes, the police being punished for harming black people is slowly but surely starting to become the new normal. But it is up to us to make sure that it stays normal. Amber Guyger is in prison, and her partner, whoever this Rivera character is, that little scumbag, he needs to be doing 20 to life as well. And that bastard who got the so-called lead investigator who perjured himself on the stand, if Mike Nifong went to prison simply for doing his job, then why the hell is this bastard not going to prison for lying on the stand? No, getting a few of white supremacy's throwaway crooks who white supremacy was helpless to save, that ain't good enough. We need to make sure the dirty cops are going to prison all day, every day. The judge in this case, she's on team white supremacy. And she's sitting here calling herself thinking that she's going to throw the verdict. That's what she's planning to do. So it's not just Amber Guyger, the police chief, or that scumbag with the Texas Rangers who need to be called out. Everybody who's acting as support staff for these foot soldiers for white supremacy must be identified, called out, and brought to account. And that must be done to our satisfaction. And finally, there have been a whole lot of salty white supremacists out there today, because they've noticed the trend. Man, all these cops getting sent to prison, and well, who's gonna stop the niggers? No one. That's who. Because for the longest time, we've had these white supremacists, when they thought that the enforcement arm of white supremacy's immunity from law would hold forever, they were talking real bold. All these white supremacists were real tough behind the safety and anonymity of their keyboard. But they were talking about, just do what the cops say and nothing will happen to you. Yeah, that's like every murderer, rapist, and robber. Give me your money or you'll get hurt. That's what they did. They reworded that to, well, do what we say and nothing will happen to you. That's been the line for the longest time. Yeah, but we ain't hearing that anymore, now are we? Because what they were doing was they were reveling in, yeah, you better do what we say or you'll get hurt. Which, of course, we all recognize to mean do what the white supremacists say. Do what white supremacy says or you'll get hurt. That's what they were really saying. You better obey white supremacy. And for any of these faux white liberals out there who are out spouting the white supremacist line, the feeble, lying talking point that they know to be a lie, oh, the police are going to be scared to do their jobs. Yeah, killing black people, just open, unrestrained violence against black people. They recognize that's the police's job. Well, if the police are scared to do their job, if the juries are putting all the cops in prison, well, what's going to happen then? Well, what happens is you actually get the police who do their job correctly, which is instead of you deciding that you trying to find out how many murders you can get away with, instead you decide, you know what, I can only use force when it's justified. And I can't use the gun at all unless there's an actual threat. That's what happens. But for all those white faux liberals and would-be folks who are trying to do the old white supremacist line that the media taught you, the white media lie about, well, aren't the police going to be scared to do their job with the juries locking them up? Well, the only thing that Professor Truth has to say to that is, obey the law and nothing will happen to you.